Welcome back to the Rich Fritzky Show. It's good to have you with us. Before I begin, this was a sad week for some of us, and I want to thank Bernie Sanders, who I have avidly supported, for his goodness and grace and his always shedding light upon what America can and should do to achieve economic, social, and environmental justice. I truly love that man and pray that my country may one day be worthy of a leader with his kind of courage and conviction. And now to that which was planned. It just never ever ceases to amaze the what the hell it is with this bond between our 45th President of the United States and the minions who hold tight to him no matter what he does. No matter that he's closing in on 17,000 lies told to them. No matter that he betrays his country and its Constitution. No matter that he eliminated the very entities and agencies that would certainly have helped temper this COVID-19 pandemic. No matter his having consistently and long ignored all of the early warning signs. No matter his downplaying of it. Even when the assault smacked us right in the damn face. No matter his insistence that 30,000 ventilators were not needed. No matter the constant misinformation and his repeatedly going so low as to use the briefings on a matter so serious, not so much to lift us up, but rather to do what he does best, bully, defame, and brag, like the insufferable preteen that he is. I must admit that I go a bit crazy when he pronounces his greatness. Crazier still when he proclaims that he is greater than any other president, and then batshit crazy when he goes so far as to say that he is greater even than Abraham Lincoln, and he has done that. For Trump is no Lincoln, and we surely need a Lincoln. Truly we do. But wishes are wishes, and reality is harsh. One of these two grew up dirt poor, and one with a golden spoon in his mouth. One lived the short and simple annals of the poor, and one grew up in luxury and received more than $450 million from Dad. One was self-taught, and the other graduated from the acclaimed Wharton School of Business at Penn. One was steeled in the ways of politics and government, and one had virtually no political or governmental experience at all. One was steadfast and true to principles and policy positions, and the other holds to vague, confused, never quite settled, and often conflicted positions. One used self-deprecating humor and joked about everything from his looks to his failings to his losses, and the other is insufferably all boast and brag and big, better, best. One held tight to morals and values that rendered him saint-like, and the other is truly devoid of any moral code. One may well have been the greatest writer and contributor to the annals of American literature, and the other struggles to put two coherent sentences together. One went to the White House to serve, and the other to rule. Abraham Lincoln's extraordinary humility was the bedrock foundation of a leadership style that precluded anything, however egregious the slight or the intrigue or the outright betrayal, from ever being taken personally by him. He may well have been president, but truly, remarkably, nothing was ever allowed to be about him. Not so with Trump, to whom everything is about him. Although it often flies under the radar, Lincoln's selflessness, more than any of his dozens of other admirable attributes and qualities, truly defined him. While General Robert E. Lee, the legendary commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, often said, "At least they do not die for me," Lincoln never doubted that they died for him and for the preservation of the Republic and of a political system dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He carried each death upon his gangly but sturdy shoulders, and in the battered recesses of his tortured soul, he took responsibility, while his contemporary Trump ever and always finds someone else to blame. Unlike Lincoln, Truman, Kennedy, and so many others, the buck never ever stops with Donald Trump. Lincoln did so to fashion a nation reborn, one that politically and spiritually long impacted for good, but one that is truly under siege today. Lincoln's national soul has been pierced and rendered what D.H. Lawrence once bitterly described as hard, isolate, stoic, a killer. America's is a soul that no longer melts. In little more than 3 years, such has been the handiwork and irredeemable sin of one Donald Trump. Pushing back, most of us still believe that we are destined to advance in the world and to improve. We still hold fast to the imagery of the light, the lamp, and the golden door. We remain the tempest-tossed, no matter the zero tolerance or the inhumane separation of mothers and children or the most recent dark executive order aimed at limiting the garnering of green cards to only those with the big bucks. Be thy rich or be thy gone. That's the new Trumpian epitaph for our once open-armed Statue of Liberty. Despite all that separates us and all of the bigotries and hatreds that rear their ugly heads, and yes, despite the ignorance that threatens, the American mind, as ever, remains the American mind. To be free, to be able to stand up, to say yes, to advance, to dream. Our voices remain inexhaustible, voices and spirits that will endure and resist until the bright lights of justice, compassion, empathy, and yes, even love, again become the cornerstone of our policy. This faith is Lincoln's gift to us, this reaffirmation of the birthright of 1776. However diminished and threatened in the moment, all of our disjointed advocacies for a government of light and not of darkness, of goodness and not of evil, of generosity of spirit and not of selfishness remain. In 1863 at Gettysburg, Abraham Lincoln invoked the promise of that declaration, and he made it the very premise upon which we fought for that new birth of freedom, for that country of, by, and for the people, for a land worthy of the 630,000 souls who gave their last full measure of devotion. What was at stake in that Civil War was our intent and our commitment to be true to that sacred promise, the same promise that has ever inspired men and women of goodwill to see us through our darkest moments, through depression, through D-Day, and the brutality of Bastogne, through the sadness of Vietnam and the horror of Little Rock, Memphis, and Selma, through November 22nd, 1963, and Kennedy, and April 4th, 1968, and Martin, and June 6th, 1968, and Bobby, through September 11th, 2001, and the COVID-19 pandemic of the spring of 2020. And there Trump stands, where Lincoln did, our Lincoln, in such stark and blazing contrast. Lincoln, for whom everything, absolutely everything, began and ended with those he served. Lincoln, who was hardwired to neither look down upon nor ever disparage anyone. Lincoln went to the White House with rich and compelling spiritual and historical foundations. He went to the White House with a chapter and verse, almost photographic familiarity with the Bible. He went to the White House with rich reverence for the Maker of all things. He also went to the White House with that same kind of reverence for the sons of liberty, the revolutionary patriots and martyrs for the cause of liberty, the founding fathers, Washington, his own idol Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, and oh so many others who saw the light that America could be. He was as good as it gets. But you must know, cannot help but know, even you who attend his rallies and love fasts must know that Trump is devoid of any and all humility. No such great equality can possibly thrive in him. And the sad truth is that any manifestation of the same is but temporal pretense and shadow. In fact, Trump despises humility. He views it as a sign of weakness. He has no tolerance for it. While the laundry list of contrasts that separate these two is massive, these three are defining. They alone actually make all the difference. These three that Lincoln had in spades, and that are nowhere to be found in the lexicon of the life that Donald Trump has lived. These three, this sense of humility, a spiritual perspective or belonging, a faith in a being, in something greater than, and a rich reverence for the history, heritage, and legacy of America's past. It's hard to know where you ought to be going if you have no damn idea of where you come from. As to these three, Trump's failing is that he has no guiding star or moral code. He's tethered neither to faith nor to history. Lincoln had been sure about the truth, but uncertain about himself. Trump is exactly the opposite. His mind is uncluttered by creeds of any kind. He knows what he wants at any given moment, but it can bear little relation to the moment to come or the moment before. In short, nothing is sacred with Trump, nor are there any settled truths. Here's the rub, though. Without settled belief, even persuasion is impossible. Without a link to the past, without any real ideology, without any moral center, Donald Trump is unhinged and adrift, and devoid of any genuine interest in anything beyond, that is, his own wealth, his ego, and most importantly, and you damn well know this, his winning. For continued victory and bearing witness to his greatness is the Alpha and Omega. It's the shining star. Please consider this, for that's him. That's all he's got. This claim to greatness, to winning, and wow, oh lucky one, oh lucky you, for you are allowed to wallow in his greatness with him, even though, and this is the maddening truth, even though it is never about you or your needs or your hopes, it is, let me repeat, never about you who idolize him. All you get is the privilege of celebrating him. Wow. There also is no point in arguing policy with Trump, because it is impossible to convince one without any convictions. And without conviction, one will, like Trump, seesaw back and forth on issues, insofar it is perceived as helping him to win. He can turn on a dime today, because he has fired all the ideologues. He's fired all the caring and thoughtful people of principle. The damn truth is only those who genuflect and bow to him are left. He makes it up as he goes along, in tweet storm after tweet storm, driven by the latest advice from the latest star among his ever-changing White House lackeys, or by the dark whims of a Rush Limbaugh or a Sean Hannity. The prevailing source of advice is ever in the wind and in the dirt and in the dark corners. Rootless, his passions beyond he, himself, and that which his cheering base reaffirms at the latest rally or ego reboot are non-existent. So when the going gets tough, he will make it up on the fly. And when it gets really tough, when he's backed into the corner, he'll unleash the big lie. He's done it all of his life. The Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before my victory kind of lie. There was only massive voter fraud that stopped me from winning the popular vote kind of lie. It is always about perception and the given day's news cycle, and neither about governing and never ever about the truth. This in such stark contrast to Abraham Lincoln, who never opened his mouth without knowing why, who always did his homework and often extensive research, who considered the historical, political, and spiritual facets of both his words and policies, who often went down the road less traveled, because that is what honor and compassion and empathy demanded of him, who put people first every time and never considered himself. Lincoln's call for reconciliation with all nations in 1865 today calls upon us to consider Trump's September 11, 2018 speech to the United Nations General Assembly. Anybody out there remember that one? Good Lord above. There he, the anti-Lincoln, bragged, boasted, and rang the alarm bells of his America First doctrine, shoved it in the face of the world. He rejected globalism, defamed the human rights efforts of the United Nations, declared the International Court to be without any standing or power at all, criticized Germany, belittled all of our other allies, announced that there will now be a litmus test before the dispensation of foreign aid, callously and cowardly balked on opening our doors to refugees, suggesting that the answer to the refugee crisis itself is for the refugee-generating countries to, yeah, you guessed it, to make their own countries great again. To all the nations of the world, his stark and clear message was that if you aren't with us, you are most certainly against us. And I was never more ashamed or embarrassed to be an American. Why not? Pick yourself up by the bootstraps, Syria, Yemen, you too, Afghanistan, that you and yours have in recent memory known only death and darkness, blood and drones and bombs. Many of them ours, by the way. No excuse, no matter the evil afoot, both within and without, that has driven your poor survivors from their homes. Just be great again. Has there ever been a more ludicrous pronouncement by any president in our history than Donald Trump's "just make your own countries great again"? To the starving millions in Yemen who have been devastated in the Saudi Arabia-led war that our president has shamelessly and immorally, in our names, in the name of our country, backed. A final maddening cry, and this for me may be that one that most horrifies and sheds a bright light upon an amorality and indifference to suffering. Some time ago, President Trump, without expressing one iota of sympathy whatsoever for the many victims of rape in the military, placed the blame for it on, and I quote, those governmental geniuses who integrated the military in the first place, rather than the men who actually and criminally assaulted their fellow service members, as if it was only natural that rape must be the consequence of men and women working together. That was the problem to him. Men and women working together, and not the rapes themselves. Of the hundreds of things said or done that drive me inside out and upside down, yes, maybe that is the one that most appalls. To your one statement, Mr. President, to your having said, "Show me someone with no ego, and I'll show you a loser," I give you Abraham Lincoln, the most moral, the most brilliant, the most selfless, and among the strongest of presidents to ever have served the United States of America. Abraham Lincoln, who saved our republic, who saved representative democracy for the world, who freed the slaves, who fostered equality for all, who longed to raise even the lowliest up in the race of life, who gave rise to our national soul and creed and ideals. No ego, Mr. President, and no loser, fully 155 years later, ever revered and honored, no one's legacy shines brighter. As to your legacy, Mr. President, I sadly shudder to think. Maybe in the end, what it'll be most remembered for is what we are living today. Is having for so long ignored the possibility of a pandemic and then even the reality of it, the lack of a plan, the bona fide, ugly unpreparedness, the lack of leadership in the face of it, the misinformation, the lies, the distortions, the making it up as he went along, and then good God above, even the self-adulation. It never stops, the self-adulation and praise in the face of it. Most Americans either take no notice or look the other way, and I am truly at a loss as to why. But history, I know this, history will not look the other way. And it will measure and account for the many deaths to be attributed to these failings. I have no idea, but history will. Most assuredly it will. Tell us just how much was lost, because it wasn't taken seriously until it was too late. So damn well do better now, Mr. President. Do us the favor of making it only about beating back the disease and not about you. Marshal the resources, honor every state's needs, all in, all together, the states, your medical team, firing on one cylinder. Then and only then might history look more kindly. As to the all of this, Lincoln might have said, with malice toward none and charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on together to defeat this monster and to finish the work we are in, as a just God would most certainly have us do. Thanks for listening, my friends. Be back soon. Take care out there. Wear the mask. Wash the hands. Do your best. See you the next time.